When seeking to understand a word's range of meaning, right, the semantic range, do not look at instances of the word from vastly different time periods. Right? Languages, as represented by this flowing line here, are changing over time. You look at the way, for example, we talk about this in the book, the word gay, what it meant in the 1600s as it's used in the King James Version, and you look at what the word gay means now, right? Now it has connotations of homosexual behavior and relationships. And in the 1600s, as it's used in James chapter 2, more detail given in the textbook there, encouraging you to read the book, that it had the idea of luxurious, right? Luxurious clothing or something like that. So we realize English is changing. In fact, there are lots of words used in the King James Version in the 1600s. Those words have either fallen out of usage or have some slightly different nuances. All languages are changing. And that's true of Greek as well, right? And so Greek, I mean, we're interested in the way Greek was used here in the first century, right? The New Testament written from roughly 45 to 90 A.D. We're interested in this time. Now it doesn't have to be that narrow, but we're interested in Greek from roughly 300 B.C. maybe to 300 A.D. Realizing that if we take a definition of a word from 800 BC, or we take a definition of a word from 1500 AD, we can't expect those to accurately reflect the usage from this time period, right? The more we can look at the way the words were used in papyri, personal letters or contracts from this time period, or authors within this time period, the more accurately we're going to be able to understand what the possibilities of what that word means. Now, the good lexicons, good dictionaries that will focus on time periods. You won't have a Greek dictionary that covers all the way from Homer to the 1500s. You're going to have Greek dictionaries that cover the time of the New Testament. They cover more classical time period. They cover Byzantine or later. And so one of the dangers related to this injunction that I'm giving you is something called the etymological fallacy. The etymological fallacy is the fallacy, the wrong belief, that you can, by looking at the etymology, the historical origins of a word, you really understand more deeply what it means. This is a fallacy. If you think about it, look at all these English words up here that we just talked about. Do you understand where they come from? Do you know the Greek and the Latin roots and the German? No, you don't. And that would probably lead you astray. It'd be interesting, but it would probably lead you astray many times as to how what the words actually mean today, right? Because words change and shift over time. And so we need to understand how the words are used in a particular time period, not how they were used 800 years before, right? And we can see the nonsense of this in looking in English. One of the best gifts my wife ever gave me was a etymological calendar. I love etymology. It's fascinating, interesting. One of them, the calendar, it said that the word lasagna comes from the Greek word lasanon, which was basically, because of the shape of the pot, was an ancient chamber pot. It was an ancient little portable toilet. But when we use the word lasagna, does knowing that origin in any way help us understand what lasagna is? That it's a pasta dish with layers of pasta with usually meat and cheese and so on. Of course not. In fact, it will lead us astray. So do not engage in the etymological fallacy. Do not think knowing the origin, the etymology, knowing the origin of a word going back hundreds of years and how it first entered the language and was used or developed, that will give you deep insight into the meaning of the word now. Now, it is true in the Bible, both in the Old and New Testament, sometimes biblical authors point out the etymology as being significant. Well, then it is significant, right? And it often relates to people's names. What do their names mean? So, example, at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, the angel tells Joseph, "You will give him the name Jesus," Jesus, and reflecting the underlying Aramaic Yeshua, because he will save his people from their sins, right? Because the name Yeshua means the Lord saves. And so names of cities, names of people, names of things like that are often significant because because the biblical author tells us that they are. and they're often related to, the name is giving some significance to God's intervention in history. And so, but that's quite different from just taking a word out of a sentence, looking at the way it was used hundreds of years earlier and thinking that gives you insight. Don't do that. Don't do that. I had a student once who brought me a printout from a report of a worship conference. And the person who was speaking at the worship conference was engaging in the etymological fallacy. They were saying, hey, the Greek word for worship is proskuneo. That is correct. That is one of the common Greek words that we find in the New Testament that's translated worship. It can also mean bow down. It, like all words, has a range of meaning. It doesn't always mean worship in the same way we mean worship. It sometimes just means to kneel or bow before. And this person was engaging in the etymological fallacy. They said, well, to get at the real root of this, we need to know how it was formed. The Greek word pros means to or toward. I'll point out, because we're still reviewing stuff. Remember, when a sigma in is at the end of a word, it's written that way. When it's in the middle of a word, right, as in the word proskuneo, I'll write out the whole word here, proskuneo, it's written like this. Okay, so that's the sigma at the beginning or the middle of the word, and the sigma at the end is written like that. So it is true, pros means to or toward, and then the person said kuneo means dog, which is wrong. The Greek word for dog is similar to this. It's kuon, right? Kuon. But kuneo, historically, go back a few hundred years, and what this meant to kiss. So etymologically, it is interesting, bow down, kiss the ground, kiss the hem of the garment. But by the time of the New Testament, this word, people didn't think, I'm convinced by the way it's used, it didn't think of kissing. They thought of, again, it was a sense of bowing down, giving obeisance towards, and even ascribing worship to, right? Worship in the sense of worship the Lord your God and Him only, right? The context has to tell us which nuance is intended there. But this is an example of bad etymological fallacy, because the word kuneo, even though it has some of the same letters, is not the word for dog, right? So it's a warning to us. It's a sad example of a mistaken etymological fallacy. Again, we're talking about some things not to do here. We talked about the illegitimate totality transfer. Don't read all the possibilities of what a word means into each instance. Don't think by looking at the history of a word and its origin that you have a deeper insight into its meaning.